Hello to the pessimistic, optimistic, and everyone in between. My name is Connor Philippi, and welcome back to the Minnesotan Sports Podcast. And it is time for the Vikings to get back into action as they will face the Las Vegas Raiders in Las Vegas here on Sunday at 3:05. And this really is a must-win game for the Vikings. I talked about this with my friend Jake in our State of the Vikings address. We did kind of a bye-week breakdown of what's gone right and wrong for the Vikings and whether we think the Vikings can make the playoffs, whether we think they will uh, get to the playoffs, and we both decided that we don't think that they will make the playoffs. And the reason for it is, I mean, look at the standings here. The Vikings are 6-6, Packers are 6-6. They're both in the 6 and 7 spots. We have two more 6-6 teams with the Seattle Seahawks and Los Angeles Rams. There's even the Bucks and the Saints that are behind them at 5-7. And you look at the schedule going forward, if the Vikings were to lose this game against the Raiders, they would be 6-7 going into a matchup against the Bengals. Even if they won that matchup, they'd then have to play the Lions twice and then the Packers as well on New Year's Eve for the last three games of the season. And my prediction personally was that the Vikings would find a way to get up to a point where it was between them and the Packers to win this division or to win this playoff spot, because I think the Seahawks will sneak in. It'll be between the Vikings and Packers, and I really think the Packers would end up winning that game and breaking the hearts of Vikings fans on New Year's Eve. But to even get to that point, we need to win this game, because if not, I don't think there's much of a chance for us. I think we need to at least split these two games against the Raiders and Bengals. So it's a big one going into this thing. Back when we were, 6-4, we didn't really think that we had really a chance of losing out of the playoffs, and then Dobbs started to get worse, and everything kind of fell apart. So this is a big win for us if we can get it. The history between these two teams, the Raiders lead the series 10-6, which it's kind of crazy that the Raiders and Vikings have both been in the league for basically the entirety of its conception. Actually, yeah, both teams have been in the league since it started, because both teams were in the NFC and AFC respectively before it all merged. So it's crazy that they've only played 16 times, even though they're both in different conferences. But one of those 16 games included the Raiders basically killing us in Super Bowl 11. It's like something like 42 to 17 or 16 or something like that. I can't remember. But the Vikings have won the last two matchups. That one was in 2015 and then in 2019. So we have at least have that going for us, and then we're 2-5 overall all time in away games. Of course, this will be the Vikings' first time heading to the new Las Vegas stadium. Going into these injuries here, Justin Jefferson is back. He is activated. He is ready to go. O'Connell said he is playing, so that will be a major factor. Hall is available. Nick Mullins a few weeks ago also came off the IR, but for the time being, Josh Dobbs will start for this game. And actually, Nick Mullins is currently the backup, at least in the official ESPN depth chart for the Vikings. Nick Mullins is named the backup here. And so it's going to be a question of whether or not Hall will get his chance and get his opportunity if Dobbs ends up continuing to struggle. My guess is that if the Vikings continue to be in the running for the playoffs, if they fall now the last two games, these next two games, I mean, and fall to 6-8, and their playoff chances start to dwindle, I feel like it's more likely that we give that chance to Hall to see what he can do. But if we do win these next two games and Dobbs continues to struggle and we win those games in spite of Dobbs, if we were to replace him, most likely I think we'd go with Nick Mullins in that situation to be more safe. And also if Dobbs gets hurt, I feel like if we're still in the running, I think Nick Mullins would be the safe option. I still think we should go with Jaren Hall either way personally, but I feel like that's the decision that the Vikings would make in that situation. And then going back into injuries here, Ed Ingram is questionable for this game. That will be a pretty big factor. And then also for the Raiders, it's Daniel Carlson, actually the kicker, that's questionable. Daniel Carlson, of course, is the kicker that the Vikings had. He missed, 3 or 4 kicks in a row against the Packers that one game, and then we pretty soon after released him. And then surprise, surprise, he goes to another team and is killing it. But he is questionable for this game against the Raiders, or against the Vikings, so that will be a major factor. Also, Max Crosby is questionable, which is a huge factor because if Crosby doesn't play, it completely changes their defensive line, and we'll have to see how that ends up working out, but that'll be a big factor whether or not he plays. Getting now into the keys to the game, the first one is that Kevin O'Connell needs to stay aggressive despite all of Dobbs' struggling in the last couple weeks. Dobbs did throw 4 interceptions in the last game against the Bears, and 3 or 4 throws as well could have been interceptions that the Bears just straight up dropped or missed. So he did not play well, but we need to continue to take shots down the field. We need to stay aggressive in those situations. I would much rather have the Vikings throw an interception than throw a screen pass for 2 yards on 3rd and 10. It's just I can't see that anymore. I can't see that Mike Zimmer-esque play style anymore. It's driving me nuts. And I can't see Kevin O'Connell turn into Mike Zimmer because it's just going to be the same cycle over and over again, and it's probably going to be even harder to get rid of that cycle this time because the locker room loves Kevin O'Connell so much. So I want Kevin O'Connell to turn into a coach that everyone likes and that is a good coach, because if he ends up being a bad coach, it's going to be really hard to get rid of him because he still is going to breed a lot of positivity in the locker room. But we're getting way ahead of ourselves with that. I still believe that O'Connell's a good coach. I just feel like with Dobbs in over Kirk, he doesn't trust Dobbs as much, and that's the reason why he is not allowing this whole offense to operate in a more aggressive sense, especially near the end of games, which we'll talk about later on in the keys. But yeah, that'll be a big factor. Also, as well, JJ being back, will that affect how confident Kevin O'Connell is in Josh Dobbs? Now that Justin Jefferson will be getting open, will O'Connell give Dobbs more of an opportunity to throw further down the field? Because yes, JJ is a good wide receiver, but Jordan Addison is also a very good receiver. And there was a point last game where he was literally wide open and Dobbs threw it out of bounds. So how much of an impact will JJ even have with the quarterback play that we've seen the last 2 weeks? Because even the best wide receiver is in trouble when a situation like this happens. But I still believe that JJ will have an impact, but how much will that impact, help us actually win with some of the play calling and quarterback play we've seen the last couple of weeks will be a factor. Can we stop Josh Jacobs? This Vikings team has been good against the run, except for when we need to be. Like when we absolutely need to be late in games. I'm not saying the defense is the reason why we're losing games by any means. I'm just saying if it gets into that situation, can the Vikings defense continue to stop the run? If they don't stop the run, it probably won't end up being their fault we lose the game, but still, it could be a major factor in trying to save this game if we get into a point where we're down by 3 late in the game. If Max Crosby plays, will this O-line be in trouble? Crosby does play on the edge, so that will be more our better guys, Darisaw and O'Neal. So, yes, it will still hurt us if Crosby plays, and the main reason for that is most likely Crosby is the kind of guy that might need to be double teamed. It'll probably open things up more in the middle of the more interior of the lines. So it's kind of a back and forth there. Well, yes, Crosby is going to be going up against our best linemen, but even against our best O-linemen, they're probably going to need help, and the middle will be a lot more open. And especially with Ettinger questionable, that interior offensive line is looking rough. So we'll have to see what happens there. Kind of going into that same aggressiveness, but more focusing on the fourth quarter, we need to stay aggressive in general in the fourth quarter when we have leads. We either need to figure out a way to get the running game to a level where we can run the ball for 4 or 5 yards in a situation where we need to ice the game away, but that's a lot less plausible because it hasn't happened all season long. It's more likely that if we run the ball for no gain and it brings up a 2nd and 10, and we are at the 50-yard line up 3 with 2.5 minutes left to go, is O'Connell willing to try and throw the ball and just try to win it right there instead of throwing the ball into the flat to a tight end or a wide receiver that's just going to gain 1 or 2 yards and then we punt it away? Because that has been the case the last few weeks, and it also feeds into that same conservative mindset that O'Connell has developed while his star quarterback in Kirk Cousins has been out, and it's scary to see. So can the Vikings take that risk and say, okay, yes, if we throw the ball here, we're going to give them more time to try and come back, but I kind of want to just win the game right here. Can you just do that, please? Because every other team seems to do it now. They're seeming to adopt that more aggressive strategy when they have the lead in those situations. We just need to adopt that. And then finally, Aiden O'Connell, he's going to fold if this defense does its job. And I think we all know that. And it'll be more of a sense of, can our offense do just enough where our defense can steal the show and win this game? Because the defense is going to play well against this Raiders team. Devontae Adams is going to be a huge factor, of course. That's kind of a sub factor of the whole defense doing its job thing. Is, will Devontae Adams have a worthy adversary in our cornerback room? Because when we're going to rush as many guys as we are going to, Devontae Adams might get some one-on-ones against these guys, and it kind of scares me. That being said, though, Devontae Adams really is the only wide receiver that is playing well this season. It sucks because as much as I personally love Hunter Renfrow, he's just not playing well this season, and he's not getting looks. And so with the rushing style the Vikings have, where they're sending so many guys, all we got to do, I feel like, is stop Devontae Adams in those situations, force O'Connell to try and look for someone else, and by the time he's looking for someone else, hopefully Danielle Hunter is on him. And if we can continue to do that, and if our secondary can hold off Devontae Adams just long enough for us to be able to get to the QB, Aiden O'Connell will not have a leg to stand on. So I think that will be, if anything, one of the biggest factors. And then finally, win the turnover battle. We got to do it. It's just the way it works. Josh Dobbs cannot continue to throw these interceptions. Hopefully, getting the running game going more in this game compared to the previous couple games will help with that. Obviously the offensive line not getting Josh Dobbs into those tough situations, but Josh Dobbs just needs to make better decisions. And on top of that, the Raiders give the ball away. They're I believe in the top 10 of turnovers in the entire league so far this season. So we need to find a way to get those turnovers. Even if we get 4 turnovers and the Raiders get 3 of ours, as long as we win it, I feel like we should be able to win this game. And that leads me to our prediction. And my prediction for this game is 13-10 in favor of the Vikings. I want to believe that the Vikings can still get this job done. I look at their offense for the Raiders, and they have a backup to the backup QB in Aiden O'Connell, a guy that I didn't even know who it was before the season started. And you look at this offensive line for the Raiders, it's really not that great. Josh Jacobs is obviously the biggest factor, as well as Devontae Adams, but besides Devontae Adams, who do the Raiders have? And I still believe that JJ can be a big enough factor to be able to muscle this Vikings team past, but it'll be an ugly game. It'll be a defensive slugfest, but I still think the Vikings have the opportunity to win this one 13-10. I think the Vikings have more to play for realistically, and it's going to come down to that. Can the Vikings fight? Can O'Connell rally this team around? It's what he does. It's supposed to be what he does as a good coach, is make these players believe that they can win a game like this. And if we don't, I really think the season is over. I thought it was officially over when Kirk got hurt. We got some new life. This is really it for me personally, because we got 2 matchups coming up against the Lions. I don't think the Packers game is going to go well either. So I think this is a must-win for the Vikings. But let me know in the comments what you think about this game. Should be a nail-biter again for the Vikings, but we'll have to see what happens. Thank you again so much for watching. Please like and subscribe, and I'll see you on the flip side.